Notes found by a TWA stewardess in a seat vacated by a Mr. John Mason after a Madison, Wisconsin to Mexico City flight, June the 29th, 1969. We only robbed from the banks what the banks robbed from the people. Dillinger, Crown Point Jail, 1934. Could have come from any anarchist text. Lucifer, bringer of light. Weishaupt's illumination and Voltaire's enlightenment, from the Latin lux, meaning light. Christianity, all in threes, Trinity, etc. Buddhism in fours. Illuminism in fives. A progression? Hopi teaching. All men have 4 souls now, but in future will have 5 souls. Find an anthropologist for more data on this. Who decided the Pentagon building should have that particular shape? Kick out the jams. Cross-check. Yok Sotot in Pnactotic manuscripts could be Yog Sothoth. Must get Simon to explain the yellow sign and the Aklo chants. Might need protection. C says the H-neophobe type outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. If so, all this is hopeless. What gets me is how much has been out in the open for so long. Not just in Lovecraft, Joyce, Melville, etc., or in the Bugs Bunny cartoons, but in scholarly works that pretend to explain. Anybody who wants to go to the trouble can find out, for instance, that the secret of the Eleusinian mysteries was the words whispered to the novice after he got the magic mushroom. Osiris is a black god. 5 words, of course. But no historian, archaeologist, anthropologist, folklorist, etc. has understood. Or those who did understand didn't care to admit it. Can I trust C? For that matter, can I trust Simon? This matter of Tlaloc should convince me, one way or the other. When Joe Malik got off the plane at Los Angeles International Airport, Simon was waiting for him.
"We'll talk in your car,"
Joe said briefly. The car, being Simon's, was naturally a psychedelic Volkswagen.
Well?
He asked as they drove out of the airport onto Central Avenue.
"It all checks out,"
Joe said with an odd calm.
"It did rain blue cats when they dug up Tlaloc. Mexico City had unusual and unseasonable rains ever since. The missing tooth was on the right, and the corpse at the Biograph Theater had a missing tooth on the left. And all the rest of it, the law of fives and all. I'm sold. I no longer claim membership in the Liberal Intellectual Guild. You behold in me a horrible example of creeping mysticism." "Ready to try acid?" "Yes,"
Joe said.
"I'm ready to try acid. I only regret that I have but one mind to lose for my Shiva Darshana." "Right on. First, though, you'll meet him. I'll drive right to his bungalow. It's not far from here."
Simon began humming as he drove. Joe recognized the tune as the Fugs' Ramesses II is dead, my love. They drove for a while in silence, and Joe finally asked,
"How old is our little group exactly?"
"Since 1888,
Simon said.
That's when Rhodes horned in and they kicked out the jams, like I told you in Chicago after the Sabbath.
"And Karl Marx?"
A schmuck, a dupe, a nebish from the word go."
Simon made an abrupt turn.
"Here we are at his house. The greatest headache they had since Harry Houdini knocked out their spiritualist fronts."
He grinned.
"How do you think you'll feel talking to a dead man?"
"Weird,"
Joe said.
"But I felt weird for the last week and a half."
Simon parked the car and held the door open.
"Just think,"
he said.
"Hoover sitting there every day with the desk mask on his desk, and half suspecting deep down in his bones how we suck at him."
They crossed the yard of the small, modest bungalow.
"What a front, huh?"
Simon chuckled. He knocked. A little old man. He was 5'7" exactly, Joe remembered from the FBI files. Opened the door.
"Here's our new recruit,"
Simon said simply.
"Come in,"
John Dillinger said.
"and tell me how an asshole egghead like you can help us beat the shit out of those motherfucking Illuminati cocksuckers." Into the jams in Michigan City prison.
Dillinger, much relaxed and less arrogant, was saying as he, Simon and Joe sat in his living room, drinking Black Russians.
"And Hoover knew from the beginning?"
Joe asked.
"Of course. I wanted the bastard to know. Him and every other high-ranking Mason and Rosicrucian and Illuminati front man in the country."
The old man laughed harshly, except for his unmistakable eyes, which still held the strange blend of irony and intensity that Joe had noted in the 1930s photos. He was indistinguishable from any other elderly fellow who had come to California to enjoy his last years in the sun.
"First bank job I pulled off in Daleville, Indiana. I used the line that I always repeated: lie down on the floor and keep calm. Hoover couldn't miss it. That's been the motto of the jams ever since Diogenes the Cynic. He knew no ordinary bank robber would be quoting an obscure Greek philosopher. The reason I repeated it on every heist was just to rub it in and let him know I was taunting him. But going back to Michigan City prison,"
Joe prompted, sipping his drink.
"Pierpoint was the one who initiated me. He'd been with the jams for years by then. I was just a kid, in my early 20s. And I'd only pulled one job, a real botch. I couldn't understand why I got such a stiff sentence. After the DA promised me clemency if I'd pled guilty, and I was kind of bitter. But old Harry Pierpoint saw my potential." "Really does go back to Babylon?"
Joe prompted.
"I'm not much of an intellectual,"
Dillinger replied.
"Action is my arena. Let Simon tell you that part."
Simon was eager to leap into the breach.
"The basic book to confirm our tradition,"
he said,
"is the 7 Tablets of Creation, which is dated at about 2500 BC, the time of Sargon. It describes how Tiamat and Aspu, the first gods, were coexisting in Mumu, the primordial chaos. Van Junst, in his Unugsprechlichen Kulten, tells how the justified ancients of Mumu originated, just about the time the 7 tablets were inscribed. You see, under Sargon, the chief deity was Marduk. That was what the high priest gave out to the public. In private, of course, they worshipped Loxotat, who became the Yog-Sothoth of the Necronomicon. But maybe I'm going too fast. Getting back to the official religion of Marduk, it was based on usury. The priests monopolized the medium of exchange and were able to extract interest for lending it. They also monopolized the land and extracted tribute for renting it. It was the beginning of what we laughingly call civilization, which has always rested on rent and interest. the old Babylonian Khan. The official story was that Mamu was dead, killed in the war between the gods. When the first anarchist group arose, they called themselves Justified Ancients of Mamu, like Lao Tse and the Taoists in China. They wanted to get rid of usury and monopoly and all the other pig shit of civilization and go back to a natural way of life. So, grok, they took the supposedly dead god Mamu and claimed he was still alive and was actually stronger than all the other gods. They had a good argument. Look around, they say. What do you see most of? Chaos, right? Therefore, the god of chaos is the strongest god and is still alive. Of course, we got our ass whipped good. We were just no match for the Illuminati in those days. Didn't have a clue about how they performed their miracles, for instance. So we got our asses whipped again in Greece when the jams got started again as part of the Cynic movement. By the time the whole thing was happening again in Rome, usury and monopoly and the whole bag of tricks, the truce took place. The Justified Ancients became part of the Illuminati, a special group still keeping our own name but taking orders from the Five. We thought we'd humanize them, like the anarchists who stayed in SDS after last year. And so it went until 1888, when Cecil Rhodes started the Circle of Initiates and the big schism occurred. Every meeting would have a faction of Rhodes boys carrying signs that said, "Kick out the jams." It was the parting of the ways. They just didn't trust us, or maybe they were afraid of being humanized. But we had learned a lot by our long participation in the Illuminati conspiracy, and now we know how to fight them with their own weapons. Fuck their weapons.
Dillinger interrupted.
I like to fight them with my weapons. You're behind the big unsolved bank robberies of the last few years. Sure, just in the planning, though. I'm too old to vault over tellers' cages and carry on like I did back in the 30s. John is also fighting on another front.
Simon interjected. Dillinger laughed.
Yeah,
he said.
I'm the president of Laughing Buddha Jesus Phallus, Inc. You've seen him. If it's not an LBJP, it's not an LP. Laughing Buddha Jesus Phallus?
Joe exclaimed.
My God, you put out the best rock in the country, the only rock a man my age can listen to without wincing. Thanks,
Dillinger said modestly.
Actually, the Illuminati own the companies that put out most of the rock. We started Laughing Buddha Jesus Phallus to counterattack. We were ignoring that front until they got the MC5 to cut a disc called Kick Out the Jams, just to taunt us with old bitter memories. So we came back with our own releases, and the next thing I know, I was making bales of money from it. We've also fed information through third parties to Christian Crusade in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so they could expose some of what the Illuminati are doing in the rock field. You've seen the Christian Crusade publications, Rhythm, Riots, and Revolution, and Communism, Hypnotism, and the Beatles, and so forth? Yeah,
Joe said absently.
I thought it was nut literature. It's so hard,
he added,
to grasp the whole picture. You'll get used to it.
Simon smiled.
It just takes a while to sink in. Give him a hint, John.
Simon suggested with an anticipatory grin.
Tell him how you got out of Crown Point jail. I've read 2 versions of that,
Joe said.
Most of the sources claim you carved a fake gun out of balsa wood and dyed it black with your shoe polish. Toland's book says that you made that story up and leaked it out to protect the man who really managed the break for you, a federal judge that you bribed to smuggle in a real gun. Which was it? Neither,
Dillinger said.
Crown Point was known as the escape-proof jail before I crashed out of it, and believe me, it deserved the name. You want to know how I did it? I walked through walls.